Hello, this is Martin Lewis of MoneySavingExpert.com on the 29th of May with a briefing about what the extension to the furlough scheme really means and what it means for people going back to work during the furlough scheme. Now, I'm doing this as the Chancellor, I've just put him on pause over there, has stood up to tell us about it because I had an embargoed press briefing that came in just before that I've been analysing, and I've also managed to get myself a little bit of an extra briefing on top about how the work system goes. So let's explain what's happening. First of all, as we already knew, the furlough scheme has been extended until October. There's been one big change though. They talked about part-time work starting on the 1st of August. You could go back and work for your employer from the 1st of August. That's been moved a month earlier, so you can now work part-time from the 1st of July. But before I get onto that, let's talk about exactly who's going to contribute and how it works. In June and July, nothing changes. The state will pay for 80% of people's salaries up to £2,500. They will contribute national insurance contributions and pension contributions, minimum pension contributions on top of that, just as it has been working. I'm afraid the news that many people have been waiting for, has there been a change in the eligibility criteria? No. If you were eligible for furlough before, you will be eligible for the extension. If you weren't before, including all those new starters, there is no change here that I've seen. He may say something when he stands up to answer. I would have loved to ask him a question in the press conference about it. But yet again, number 10 has turned down Money Saving Expert. But let's not go on about that. Let me talk to you through exactly what's going to happen. Well, the first thing is in June and July, there's no change. Employers will still get all that funded. From the 1st of August, and for the month of August, employers will have to start to contribute towards national insurance contributions and minimum pension contributions in the way that they normally did. So what they normally paid, they will now start to pay, which effectively represents an equivalent contribution towards a furloughed members of staff salary of 5%. From September, and in the month of September, the state will only provide 70% of salaries up to £2,190. Employers will be expected to top that up to the minimum 80% to a maximum contribution of £2,500. So effectively, employers are going to pay the extra 10% plus the national insurance plus the pension contributions. That means for an employee who is totally furloughed, now the employer will be contributing 14% in September. In October, it goes up, the last month of furlough, it goes up again. The state will be contributing 60% of salaries up to £1,875. And companies whose employees are on the furlough scheme will have to top that up to a minimum of 80% up to a maximum contribution of £2,500. So the employee will always get the 80% up to a maximum of £2,500 of their salary. The key here is how much will the employer have to contribute towards that. In the last month, if you add up the 20% that they're going to have to give, plus national insurance, plus pensions, that's equivalent to 23% of the employee's cost while on furlough. Now, the reason that that's important, I'm afraid, is it's not that good news. I mean, it's very good news for anyone whose work is viable and is going to go back to work. But the problem is, once we start to ramp up employers' costs, if they don't believe an employee is viable, they're likely to start a redundancy process, one way or the other. And they will want to do that from August. Currently, the only actual cost of having an employee on furlough is accrued holiday pay. From August, it'll be national insurance contributions and pension contributions. So if you know that's a member of staff you won't be keeping after October, you're going to probably make them redundant now. And you can make people redundant during furlough. There are technicals behind it. You need to talk to an employment lawyer, which you can probably access through your trade union, or go directly to an employment lawyer, or if not, try and speak to Citizens Advice if you think that your employer is not treating you fairly and is putting you on redundancy. But in the generality, they will be wanting to make people redundant then. Let me move on to the more positive bit of this. One of the advantages to the change and the flexibility that the Chancellor is incorporating is from the 1st of July, you're going to be able to do part-time work. So how will that work? And this is the stuff that wasn't in the press release, but I have confirmed for you the practical process here. Effectively, if you work for your employer, you should be paid, and generally that should be under the furlough scheme at what your old wage was. Now, you may have agreed something about a change of wage with your employer. Again, that's an employment lawyer's issue. I'm going to talk on the fact that your salary outside of furlough is still what it was. So let's talk about how this works. Let me give you an easy example. Let's take someone who earns £1,000 a month. Currently, they're likely to be on furlough at £800 a month, 80% of the £1,000. Let's imagine for that £1,000 a month, they work 40 hours a week. I'm trying to keep all the numbers simple. So work 40 hours a week, earn £1,000 a month, currently getting £800 a month. Imagine they were to go back to work for 10 hours a week or a quarter of their time. For the 10 hours a week, all of their salary needs to be paid by the employer. So a quarter of the £1,000 is you'd receive £250 for that. Your furlough pay would be reduced by a quarter because furlough only pays for the hours you are not working. So we reduce your furlough pay from £800 to £600. You now get £250 of paid work from your employer and £600 from furlough pay. Effectively, you're going back to work, you're now earning £850 a month rather than £600 a month. We haven't got the underlying technical details of this yet. That will come on the 12th of June. My suspicion, and it is only a suspicion, is if your employer wants you to work, then you need to come back to work unless you have a good reason not to come back to work, such as you're shielding or there's childcare issues, in which case talk to your employer. But otherwise, you can go back, you should be going back to work. And yes, of course, you're not going to be earning that much more by working if you're just doing a few part-time hours than otherwise, but that's the sort of social contract that we have for the furlough scheme. We want to get people back to work because that means the state is paying less and the employer is paying you for when you work. So hopefully that gives you an understanding. Eligibility hasn't changed. Furlough scheme's been extended. From August, the amount that your employer has to contribute gradually starts to step up. Less than we first thought in August. We thought it'd go to straight to 20% straight away, but it's not. It's just the national insurance contributions and the pension contributions. And from the 1st of July, you can go back to work part-time. There is no limit on the part-time hours. So let's say you work 40 hours a week. Well, you could go back to work 39 hours a week, and 1 hour could be furlough. And that can be altered by the week. Employers are able to alter that. It'll tend to be on a week-by-week agreement. What I'm hearing is you could alter that so you could work 15 hours one week, 5 hours the next week, 30 hours the week after, and that would all be legitimate under the scheme. Again, though, that's word of mouth, not reading the technical details, because I say word of mouth, it's a proper briefing from a very good source, an official source. But I haven't read the technical details on it. That's going to come out on the 12th of June. But that gives you a rough idea of how it's likely to work. I hope that's useful. All updates, if you've got questions, the key guides on moneysavingexpert.com, our coronavirus employment guide, will have far more details as we learn more and as more come out. If you've got questions about this, you'll have the ability there to ask questions that we will try and get answers for you. And I will, on Twitter and Facebook, be telling you more and more details as we learn more. So see this as an instant response, big picture. The Chancellor, when I'm about to press play as soon as I finish this to listen to what he's going to say, he's going to be explaining it. I don't know which of the details that I've given you, he'll give you, and vice versa. But hopefully this lets you understand roughly how it's going to work. I hope that's helpful. Take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye.